Trade winds blowing in Edmonton. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Short Shifts for Friday, 12/12/2025. Morren and Smith with you, and we're going to get to those two trades pulled off by the Oilers Friday morning in just a couple of moments. But first, it is less than 2 weeks from Christmas, and we just want to thank all of you that listen to us on all podcast platforms. And if you tune in on Spotify or Apple, please give us a review. Let us know what you think of the show. We'd very much appreciate that. And for those of you that check us out on YouTube, please subscribe. Neil and I count on our listeners constantly to give us feedback and also to spread word about NHL Wraparound and Short Shifts and all of our various franchises.
Yeah, and tell us what you want to hear and what you like and what you don't like, and we'll actually read it on the show. If you send us an email, you can get to us, Neil at NHLWraparound.com or Vic at NHLWraparound.com. And as I said, if you send us an email, we'll actually mention you on the show.
Sounds like a good deal from this end. Let's get to the trades. Early Friday morning, Stan Bowman, GM of the Oilers, acquired goaltender Tristan Jarry and forward Samuel Poulin from the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for Stu Skinner, defenseman Brett Kulak, and a second-round draft pick. And then in a separate deal, the Oilers pick up defenseman Spencer Stastny from Nashville for a 2027 third-round pick. This Stastny is not related to the legendary brothers of NHL lore, Peter, Anton, Marion, and later Peter's son, Paul. Different spelling. But Neil, a lot to unpack here. So tell us whether you believe this is a true upgrade for the Oilers or if there's a little bit more to this.
Well, Tristan Jarry was a bad contract that was done by the Penguins at 5 years at $5.375 a year, and they've been looking to unload that deal. And obviously the Edmonton Oilers and the Edmonton faithful had become a little bit disenchanted with Stu Skinner, even though he took them to the finals the last two seasons, even though they went to Game 7 in 24. At 27 years of age, 3 years younger than Tristan Jarry, making almost $3 million less than Jarry, but he will be a UFA at the end of the year. So he goes to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh plays him for the rest of the season and decides whether they want to make a move to get him signed before the summer so that he stays in Pittsburgh with quite an increase, I would think. Pittsburgh also gets a 31-year-old unrestricted free agent in Brett Kulak, who makes $2.75 in the last year of a 4-year deal that he signed with the Oilers. So that's the deal. Really, Samuel Poulin is also in there, but he's not really of any significance at this point in his career. Tristan Jarry does not have the resume that Stu Skinner has. So I say that as far as a player, Pittsburgh won this trade, getting Skinner and getting Brett Kulak as another solid NHL defenseman. And the Edmonton Oilers go to Tristan Jarry, and for whatever reason, Stan Bowman and his staff feels that Tristan Jarry is better than Stu Skinner. You know, doesn't this remind you of the Stu Skinner thing, being an Edmonton, Alberta native? There's a little bit of a Mitch Marner sense to this, where maybe there was more criticism on Skinner because he's a local guy, like Marner felt in Toronto when Toronto wasn't able to succeed in the playoffs, and so he wanted out, and he's now in Vegas. Maybe they were harder on Stu Skinner because he's from Edmonton. I mean, we don't live there. We don't know. But that's one question we need to ask somebody like Craig McTavish and find out, who lives in Edmonton and still does TV for the Oilers. Is there any truth to that? Is that what happened with Skinner? But from this vantage point, it certainly looks like Pittsburgh won this swap of goaltenders.
Spencer Stastny comes in also as a defenseman, who's a third pair on Nashville, but had played all 30 games for the Predators this year. But I'm just looking at the long game for the Oilers here, as they have now moved into the first wild card in the Western Conference. But is this team any better now than they were 24 hours ago?
No, I just said I think they lost this trade. I don't think Tristan Jarry's as good as Stuart Skinner. But you know what? We'll see. Does Jarry come in there with a whole new breath of fresh air? And does Stuart Skinner say, oh, thank God I'm out of Edmonton for once after spending his whole life there? Now, he'll get caught in the having to wait to get clearance to get into the U.S. because a Canadian kid always played on a Canadian team. Now going into the U.S., he's going to have to get a visa, to play in the States, where Tristan Jarry is from British Columbia, so he'll just be going back to Canada. He's a Canadian citizen. He won't have any problem. So it'll be interesting to see how Skinner does. And wouldn't surprise me that Skinner plays great for Pittsburgh because he couldn't get Edmonton to the promised land. We all, including me, were a little bit hard of our opinion on him.
Yes,
because
you were.
well, I think you were too. Although you said that they had now found a number one because he took them to Game 7 in the final in 24. Remember saying that?
Not many have done that. So,
well, yeah, but then again, Anderson on Carolina, you can't stop beating like a rented mule because he couldn't get Toronto there. Anyway, let's see what happens on this. Skinner, I think, is the better goaltender and the younger goaltender and the cheaper goaltender.
I think kind of lost in this also is, do we start to see maybe an increased workload for Calvin Pickard for the Oilers?
Perhaps. I don't know. I don't have in front of me the breakdown of how many games each one of them has played this season and how that workload has been distributed. Pickard and Skinner were sort of 1A and 1B to some extent. They weren't really a clear 1 and a clear 2. There was times in the playoffs last year when Knobloch started Pickard, even though Skinner was healthy and ready to go, and he still started Pickard. So that could be true, although I don't think anybody in the league is calling Calvin Pickard a number one goaltender.
I'll agree with you on that one. Let's stay on goaltenders as we now move to the games over the last couple of nights. In Montreal, the Canadiens called up Jacob Fowler, who was a third-round pick in 2023. And Canadiens have well-documented issues in goal this year between Jakub Dobeš and Sam Montembeault, whose collective numbers and, of course, individually are not very good this year. So some were regarding this as a panic move by the Canadiens. Well, whatever the case, Fowler made his debut in Pittsburgh on Thursday, made 36 saves, including 16 in the third period in a 4-2 win for the Canadiens. He was named the game's first star, and watching him pretty closely the entire night, he was very unflappable, had very good mechanics, was poised, was very economical in terms of his movement. So, look, this is one game. We're not going to judge an entire career, obviously, based on one game. And for all we know, the way this league operates, he could go into New York on Saturday if they decide to start him and get lit up by a Ranger team that can score. So that's how unpredictable this league is. But for one night, made a big impression. They had shots of his mom continuously during the course of the night. And boy, I mean, she had a 16-ounce beer in her hand at the end of that game.
A little bit of background on Jacob Fowler, born in Melbourne, Florida, played at BC, Boston College, had good numbers at Boston College. And then, of course, being drafted by the Montreal Canadiens in the third round back in 2023, played last season only 3 games for the Laval Rocket after coming up from Boston College at the end of their season. And this season had good numbers at 2.09 goals against and a 9.19 save percentage. So his numbers have been good. We'll see if he can continue. He's just a 21-year-old goaltender, catches with his left hand. That's a great way to start. Great way to give yourself some confidence.
And he joined some pretty good company. And this one was all over TSN last night, all over the internet, that other Montreal goalies to win their first starts in Pittsburgh, of all places. Ken Dryden, 1971, Patrick Waugh, in 1985. That was actually Waugh's second game. His first game came in a relief appearance against the Winnipeg Jets that year. And Carey Price in 2007. So good little piece of trivia there, and some good company for Fowler as well.
Montreal is one of these places, as the Rangers have been blessed too, but Montreal Canadiens have been blessed for decades of having superior goaltending. I mean, George Vezina, Jacques Plante, and then you can go all the way forward to Carey Price during some tough years for the Canadiens.
Gump Worsley, Bill Durnan.
Gump Worsley, Ken Dryden, Patrick Waugh, of course. And I mean, they've just had some great goaltenders in Montreal. They've not gone through a long period of time with bad goaltending, as a lot of franchises have. So
Jose
we'll
Theodore.
see if this can be the next one. No, we can keep going.
Yeah, we can. But we're going to go to Carolina now, because Brandon Bussi becomes the first goalie in NHL history to win 10 out of his first 11 games. A 3-2 shootout win at Washington. Logan Stankoven tied the game with 2:15 left, and then Bussi stopped all three in the shootout. But what I saw interesting in this game was it reminded me a lot of the second round last year, where the Capitals really had a difficult time keeping up with the Hurricanes, and that Washington had this lead late, really flattered them because they were outshot 39-25, but it was 29-9 after two periods, and the Hurricanes had an 83-46 edge in shot attempts. So even though this is a one-goal game, the way this game was played was certainly dominated by the Hurricanes. But let's not lose sight that Bussi, 10 out of 11. And perhaps this is the goalie that 4 months from now, the Canes turn to in the postseason.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Brandon Bussi, the goaltender who catches with his right hand. He's 27 years old, undrafted from Sound Beach, New York, and that is a little town on the North Shore of Long Island. Where did he go to college? Of course, Western Michigan University.
Oh, here we go.
19 through 22. His numbers his last year were great. Played 39 games, 2.55 goals against, and a .912 save percentage. He should have been a Boston Bruin because he played a number of years for the Providence Bruins. Never signed by Boston, though, and Carolina signed him, and now here he is. And again, what a great story. Undrafted from Long Island. But the best part is he played for Western Michigan. Let's face it, probably is going to go down as the highlight of his life.
All right, enough of the bouquets from you. We're going to turn to a couple of rather sour goaltending performances now on Thursday. So much for the praise for Jacob Markstrom after his win in Ottawa on Tuesday. On Thursday against Tampa Bay, he gets the hook after 7 minutes and 56 seconds, allowing 3 goals on 7 shots. It's an 8-4 win for the Lightning. Nikita Kucherov with 4 assists. The Lightning have scored 14 goals in their last 2 games in Montreal and Jersey, coming off a 4-game losing streak. The Devils played that game without Timo Meier, who was on a leave of absence due to a family health matter, and Evgeny Dadonov, who goes on IR with a wrist injury. But let's go back to Markstrom for a second, because I think after Tuesday, perhaps the thought by Sheldon Keefe was, let's get him back out there. Perhaps he's going to get on a little bit of a roll here. He doesn't even make it to the 8-minute mark.
No, and his numbers this year, for whatever reason, are just the worst of his career. He's a 3.66 goals against in the 16 games that he's played for the Devils this year, and his save percentage is well under 900. It's only 875. So in a position where everything is about the stats, everything about goaltending is what are their stats, because that's how you can judge. I mean, how many pucks do they let in compared to how many pucks do they stop? He's just not having a good year. Obviously, his confidence is down. Last year, just to give you a reference point, After 49 games, he was 2.5 goals against and a .900 save percentage. So they thought they had their guy going into this season, but he hasn't been that so far.
Let's now go to Columbus, where the Blue Jackets welcome back Captain Boone Jenner after missing exactly 1 month, 14 games with an upper body injury. He had a goal and an assist. That's the good news. The bad news is goaltender Elvis Merzlikins, who has been the number one for the Blue Jackets for quite some time now, pulled after giving up 3 goals on 5 shots in a 6-3 loss to the Ottawa Senators, in which Jet Greaves, who actually relieved Merzlikins, got the loss in that game as the Senators snap a 3-game losing streak. But let's look at the numbers here. Merzlikins, 4.03 goals against average, .879 save percentage. Greaves, 2.74 and .907. And by looking at the play this year, and Greaves has gotten more action, I think it's time Greaves is clearly anointed as the number one.
Yeah, and Merzlikins is 31 years of age now. The Latvian goaltender at one point asked to be traded out of Columbus because he said he should be the number one guy, and he did end up becoming the number one guy. His numbers really have never been that great. Yes, he's on Columbus, so that doesn't make it any easier for a goaltender to get good numbers on a weaker team in the NHL. But as you said, he's .879 save percentage this year. That's the lowest he's had since back in 22-23 when he was actually .876. So you're right, Jet Greaves is the younger guy and probably the guy that's going to be anointed at some point here to take over for Elvis.
Let's talk about some 4-point games on Thursday evening. Steven Stamkos' time in Nashville cannot be really summed up as being very good in almost a season and a half that he's been there. But on Thursday, the second 4-goal game of his career and in the NHL this season, Logan Cooley had the other one. A 7-2 win for the Predators, who are now 6-2 in their last 8. Stamkos up to 594 career goals. So certainly, I'm not going to say things are completely turning around in Nashville, but at least there's a little bit of feel-good going on there right now.
Well, and certainly in Steve Stamkos' locker there is, but that was quite a win over Jim Montgomery and his St. Louis Blues. Last night I was watching that score just click and click and click for the Predators. The goals keep going in, and great night to give Nashville a little bit of relief from this pitiful year and a half they've had so far of this time after they've signed all these free agents, but a tough night for the St. Louis Blues.
In Winnipeg, David Pastrnak, in his second game back, 2 goals, 2 assists in the Bruins 6-3 win in Winnipeg. Boston has now won 4 straight and are tied atop the Atlantic with Tampa Bay, though the Bruins have played 1 more game. Connor McDavid, 4 assists. Zach Hyman, his 6th career hat trick and a 4-1 win over Detroit. The Oilers 3-0-1 in their last 4, and as we mentioned at the top of the show, now wild card 1 in the Western Conference. And Anders Lee, 2 goals, 2 assists in the Islanders' 5-2 win over Anaheim. But in this game, Bo Horvat, leading goal scorer on the team, left with a left leg injury after getting tangled up with Drew Hellison of the Ducks in the second period. Now, after this game, Patrick Roy said that he is listing him as day-to-day. So the suggestion there, despite the optics of it, is perhaps maybe this injury is not as serious as it first appeared.
It was a freak thing. He caught his skate in the skate and boot of the defender and sort of splayed his legs apart, which to me said he's either got a knee issue or a groin, a bad groin pull, the way his legs went like in the splits position. He certainly went off the ice in a lot of agony when he got up from the ice by the net, by the goaltender, and went straight to the dressing room. I doubt that Patrick Waugh would lie about it. If he is only day-to-day, it's a great break for the Islanders.
It certainly is, and we'll have an update on that on Monday on Short Shifts. A couple of other notes. How about Mark Stone? 2 goals, including the overtime winner, the 3-2 win for Vegas over the Flyers on Thursday. He's only played 14 games this season, but he's got points in every one of them.
I was with Kelly McCrimmon, the general manager of the Vegas Golden Knights, the other day on Long Island, and he said to me, getting Stone back is always a big boost to their team. He's gotten injured a number of times, but he's a huge part of that hockey club, even though, he may not show up on the score sheet every night, but he's an integral part of their success.
You want to feel old?
I already do.
Me too. Well, we're going to feel older right now. On Thursday, Colorado Avalanche rookie Gavin Brindley scored in the second period, assisted by Brent Burns. This was part of a 6-2 Avalanche win over the Panthers, who were playing a second of a back-to-back. Burns was drafted 472 days before Brindley was born. He was a first-round pick for Minnesota in 2003. Brindley was born in October of 2004.
That's a great one. And I'm sure Burnsy has some fun with that in the locker room, because obviously Brindley could be his son. Since Gordie Howe and Mark and Marty, I don't think we've seen a father-son on a team together, but it could be in this case, but they're not. But still, to me, it just shows what a great athlete Brent Burns is. It says more about Brent Burns to me than it says about Brindley. Brindley is one of many young guys to come into the league and play really well young in their life. But to keep playing at over 40 years old and play at the level that Burns plays at is just awesome.
It's just so neat they were on the same scoring sequence. And Ray Ferraro on ESPN last night was all over that one. So a lot of fun with their ages right there. Remember on Tuesday, there were so many late heroics with 4 games being tied with 14 seconds or less. We had some more heroics on Thursday. In addition to Carolina coming back in Washington, on Wednesday, Florida defeated Utah 4-3. Anton Lundell, game winner with 52 seconds left in regulation. Also on Wednesday, Seattle beat Los Angeles 3-2 in overtime. Marty Beniers tied the game with 26 seconds left, and then Vince Dunn won it in overtime. Both of those goals coming on the power play. And on Thursday, San Jose defeated Toronto 3-2. John Klingberg with the game-tying goal with 1:25 left in regulation. Alex Wenberg, the overtime winner. So the lesson here, don't turn off your television.
And that game was in Toronto. So I want to make that very clear. The Sharks went into Toronto, were down after the first period, and ended up coming back and beating the Leafs in front of their own fans, which I know how that feels. And that's a big victory for San Jose and their young team, and a big loss for Toronto and their team.
You're not calling them the Sharkies anymore.
No, well, we that's because I don't have AJ with me. AJ's the one that would say that to me when we were in the car together.
Right.
Daddy, those poor Sharkies.
Not anymore. Let's go to the injuries. And we welcome anybody that wants to sponsor Short Shifts or any of the segments within, because maybe we should contact Johnson & Johnson or Curad or anybody that handles medical supplies, because you're certainly going to get plenty of airtime here. In that Toronto-San Jose game, Oliver Ekman-Larsson left with a left leg injury. He got tied up with Adam Gaudette. The team is already without Chris Tanev, Brandon Carlo, who is now out an additional month after undergoing surgery last week, and Dakota Mermis. So, once again, how much can a team sustain here?
They don't have a great defense to begin with in Toronto. It's good, but it's not great. But Tanev was a big part of the team last year and this year and is badly missed. Carlo is a guy that they got at the deadline from the Bruins and has played really well for them. So Toronto is hurting on the back line, no doubt.
Other injuries. Roope Hintz of the Dallas Stars left late in the Stars' loss in Minnesota after taking a shot to the right foot from fellow countryman Miro Heiskanen. This was as Dallas was trying to tie that game late, so we should have an update on him on Friday. Victor Hedman, captain of the Lightning, back to IR after leaving Tampa's win in Montreal on Tuesday. He missed 28 days between November and December before playing the last 3 games, so he's back on the shelf again for at least into next week. Ryan Leonard, forward for the Capitals, out with a shoulder injury for the next 3 to 4 weeks. He was hit by Jacob Trouba in Anaheim on December the 5th. Matt Zuccarello of the Minnesota Wild to IR after sustaining that hit from Vince Dunn in Monday's win in Seattle. He could return as early as December the 16th against Washington. No timeline, though, for Jake Middleton, defenseman for the Wild, who is also on IR after leaving with an upper body injury in the same game. And we've been updating Logan Cooley over the last couple of days since he injured his left leg, hitting the goalpost in Vancouver on December 5th. GM Bill Armstrong has now announced that Cooley is expected to miss 2 months. Here's a weird one, and I know you didn't see this because you were heading home from UBS Arena last night. Before the Canucks-Sabres game, forward Alex Tuck went to the end boards and greeted his family at the glass, and then, after parting from them, seemed to have brushed into Bowen Byram. Soon after that, as he was taking shots in warm-ups, appeared uncomfortable, left the ice, didn't play in the game.
And you wonder, why was his family in Vancouver? Of all places, they're from Western New York. So you wonder why they would be in Vancouver, unless it's a parents' trip or something like that. But yeah, that's a weird one. But I know they did call it an illness.
And finally, soapbox item here. Charlie McAvoy returned in Thursday's win at Winnipeg after missing 11 games for facial surgery. The graphics said that he was coming back from an upper body injury. And I am tired of having mine, yours, and every listener out there having their intelligence insulted by this. Because to call it an upper body injury when we saw him get hit in the face with the puck, we know he had facial surgery, he comes back with a full cage, what the hell else can it be?
I don't know why they don't call it like it is, but who the hell knows?
Well, it was the same thing with all of those leg injuries that we saw last night. Bo Horvat, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Roope Hintz, they're all leg injuries. We all know that. Don't tell me that they're lower body. I already know that piece. Give me a little bit more detail when it's that obvious.
Soapbox, for sure.
A final note here from the personnel area. Dylan Dubé signed a PTO with Springfield of the AHL, that's the Blues minor league affiliate. And now all 5 players that were acquitted of sexual assault in July in London, Ontario, are now active in either the NHL, Europe, or the AHL. And to end that up, Carter Hart, returning to Philadelphia on Thursday, did not play in that game. There was no video tribute. And I think this works out well for both the Golden Knights and the Flyers in that the Golden Knights win the game with Akira Schmidt in goal, and the Flyers did the right thing, just not acknowledging Hart at all, and let's let this thing just go away and part with him for good.
Yeah, they'll next play Carter Hart and the Vegas Golden Knights, if he's still there, next season in Philadelphia. So it's not like they have to worry that it's coming up again later this year. They only visit the Eastern teams once all year. So we'll wait and see.
Before we go, congratulations to the latest U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame inductees, happening a couple of nights back. Joe Pavelski, Scott Gomez, Zach Parisi, Tara Mountsie, and photographer Bruce Bennett, who you know very well, and I certainly look forward to having him on this show very soon.
Yeah, and we're going to try to get him on here in the next couple of weeks and talk about his Hall of Fame career. All the great photos you see from the last 40 years are usually from the lens of Bruce Bennett.
I certainly hope he gives us permission to use some of them when we do his interview.
Well, he's got to get his parent company, Getty, to give us a permission.
Well, hopefully they will, because, as you said, some of the most memorable shots ever taken come through his lens. Our website is NHLWraparound.com. Check out our blog section, where in New York Centric, last three pieces by Patrick Hoffman on Vladislav Gavrikov of the Rangers, Ilya Sorokin of the Islanders, and Jacob Markstrom, whose struggles continue in net for the New Jersey Devils. Neil's Nuggets. So you put a piece together a couple of days ago regarding the difficulty of teams coming home after road trips of 4 or more games, and the numbers certainly substantiated that more teams come home and lose than win. However, the last 3 teams that have come off 4-game road trips have all won. Chicago against the Rangers on Wednesday, Colorado against Florida, and Minnesota against Dallas on Thursday. Explain.
Well, Florida had played the night before when they went into Colorado, so that's not hard to explain. I mean, Colorado's one of the best teams. You're going to talk about the Minnesota-Dallas game in a second, and the Rangers suck. So they go into Chicago and let Chicago win. So there's your answer.
Good reasons right there. Well, as you said, we were going to talk about Minnesota and Dallas because on Thursday, your Smith's picks were 4-2. You actually gave us the 6th game, so we all thank you for that. One of those 2 losses was Dallas in Minnesota, but you talk about the rationale of why you make certain picks. How could you argue when Dallas came into Minnesota with a 4-game winning streak, an 11-game point streak, a 13-game road point streak, and a 15-game point streak against the Wild? Go figure.
That's why we pick them the way we do, but we never know what the result will be.
Remember, everybody, to give us a review on Apple and Spotify, and please subscribe on YouTube. Enjoy the hockey this weekend. We'll be back with Short Shifts on Monday.